What do you get when you cross Gen Zs, Millennials, Gen Xs, and Baby Boomers all sharing the same break room? Well, aside from wildly different playlists, snack choices, and opinions on what ASAP means, you get a leadership nightmare or you get a powerhouse team, depending on how you lead. And that's what we're talking about today on Marc Haine Live. Welcome to this episode of Marc Haine Live. I am so glad that you're here with me today. This, of course, is where small business owners and entrepreneurs pick up core skill sets to create the show-stopping, jaw-dropping experiences that your customers and your employees deserve. I am your host, customer and employee experience strategist, Marc Haine, and today I am joined here with my sister, Michelle Pascoe, an authority in multi-generational customer experiences, a certified speaking professional, and today we will be uncovering what it really takes to lead a team made up of boomers, millennials, Gen Zs, or is that Gen Zs? And of course, everybody else in between, without pulling your hair out or watching your best people walk out. My one request is please, 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 if you know somebody who could use this information, maybe they have some headaches in their workplaces, and you think that maybe this would help, share the link to this episode. And please do make sure that you share this episode. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast as well, because that will give you notifications when I bring you fresh new content each and every week. You know, I've been doing this since March of 2020, and I'd love to see the business community really rallying around what I've been doing for the last, oh goodness, how many? 251 episodes. This is 252. And of course, it's all free. This is all free information that you could use to make your businesses better or pass it on to help somebody else make their businesses better. Go ahead. I dare you. Yeah, it's really funny because today's workforce really spans 5 generations. This is the first time in my lifetime that I've seen 5 generations in the workplace. And each of the generations has its own quirks, its own values, and its own workplace expectations. And while it may sound like a recipe for chaos, or at the very least, very loud debates about email etiquette, it's actually a really great opportunity if you know how to lead them. But here's the big thing. If you treat your 24-year-old frontline superstar the same way that you manage your 50-year-old team lead, you're not leading either of them effectively. You're just winging it. And that brings me to our question of the day. So, are your leadership strategies really building loyalty across your whole team? Or are they pushing people out the door? And those people tend to be maybe your best people. I'd love to know what your experience is. Go ahead, share a link to this episode on your favorite social media platform, hashtag it experience leadership, and be part of this conversation. If you're tuning in live, feel free to ask questions in the comment box. We'll see it pop up on the screen, and we can address what your comments or your questions might be. As I mentioned, my guest today, I feel is my sister because we're both hospitality people. We both love the people business, and she is a multi-generational customer experience specialist and a certified speaking professional with more than 30 years of experience. Michelle Pascoe has trained and led teams from the front line to middle management, spanning every generation from boomers to Gen Z. She is the founder of one of Australia's top training and mystery shopping companies, host of the Michelle Pascoe Hospitality Podcast, and author of Igniting Potential and the VIP Principle. Michelle, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's wonderful to be on your show. And hello to all the listeners, wherever you may be.
So before we get too deep into our topic today, could you just let people know a little bit about who your customers are and how you serve them?
Certainly. So I commenced my company back in 1994, and in those early days, Mark, it was well, what was my good skill set, and that was typing as well as talking. So I started my training company on how to use the telephone effectively, and going out to all industries. And then it was only in a very few short weeks that I entered the registered club industry. Now that here in Australia is they're very big here on the eastern seaboard of Australia. You'd be looking something similar to the Native American casinos. So that style, certainly smaller than Vegas, but looking at all components of entertainment, both bar, gaming, foyer, shows, childcare centres, health centres. They're diversified retirement villages. They're so big now. And so when I got into that, just training those first few in the foyer, it then became my passion because it wasn't just the venues, it was the people inside them. And so over the last 3 decades, I have been able to be on the journey of individuals as well as organizations and seeing them grow. And that's why I love the hospitality industry so much, Mark, because you can have somebody who has got high university credentials or somebody who's just entering the workforce for that very first time, or perhaps somebody who's returning to the workforce who could be a little bit shy about, well, what's my ability and where am I going to fit into the workforce?
Yeah, and of course, because the barrier to entry is kind of low in hospitality, so you do get people all over the spectrum, don't you? And to that point, you get different personality types as well. And that
Yes.
in itself, I mean, before we had the multi-generational workforce, when I was kind of going up, I too, by the way, grew up in casinos and then
Yes.
hotels and restaurants. So it's really interesting to see the parallels of our
Yeah.
experiences. But having said that, it used to be kind of it was personality clashes because you had different
Mm,
people on the spectrum of different personalities. But now we have the personality division, but now we
mm.
have the age division. So
Yes.
when it comes down to this idea now that we are now leading multi-generational workplaces, what's going wrong in how we start leading these teams?
Well, I think you mentioned before, Mark, you can't just the one size fits all mentality. But I also believe it's getting people together because we hear so much on social media out there and all these myths about what this generation is like. Oh, those young ones are impatient. They want the job straight away. They won't work as hard as I. Then you've got them looking up going, oh, when are they ever going to retire? And I think to myself, have you actually spoken to somebody in that age group? And so to me, it's getting them back together. And I have really been truly blessed over the years. And one time was I had a group of about 20, 25 in the room at a particular venue. And there was a young boy, Aaron, who was 18. That was his very first day. And I had June, who was 81, who was a team leader in one of the dining areas, and every generation in between. And that just gave me a moment truly to see over my career that when you get them in the room and they start finding out a little bit more about that person, the person behind the age demographic, oh my goodness, they're just like me. I can learn from them. I can share from them. To me, it just blows away a lot of those myths.
It's amazing because it does mean that we're asking people to be present with some level of curiosity, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. Yes, yeah. Which people go, oh, I haven't really got the time for that. I'll just hear what's being said, and or I'll just stick to my group, or I'll just take the what somebody has told me already in the workplace about that worker, and I'll put that negative filter on, and because I just don't have time, and that's really disappointing. And when you talk about personalities, I'm a big believer in the DISC behavioral profiling. I love DISC, and I know there's a number of different programs out there, but I've been using that for over 15 years, and that really shows them that little bit more style on that communication. Because you're right, Mark, you not only you've got generational like age diversity, but then you've got that personality or the behaviors and the beliefs and those values which transcends across all generations, but also all the individuals within those generations. So how do we connect with them without just putting on that negative filter of, oh, well, they're just like that because, well, they're boomers or that Gen Z?
And to your point, when you say, "Hey, why don't we try to be present with some level of curiosity?" People are
Mm.
like, "I'm not here to make friends. I'm just here to do my work."
Yes, I just bundy on and bundy off. No, there's going to be a lot more, because what happens when we don't work together within a team, of course, it's going to impact the other team members, but it's going to impact our members, our guests, our customers, our clients, whatever you wish to call them. They're the ones, because I'm sure Mark and all your listeners have experienced, like I have. You walk into a restaurant or a cafe and you're thinking, oh, I'm looking forward to that lovely coffee or a cup of tea. And you walk in and you can see the staff, well, you can literally cut the air with a knife. They
Yeah.
don't like each other. And you think, oh, how can I back out of here? Because I wanted to have an enjoyable coffee. I might as well have just stayed at home and made my own. And so we've got to understand that if we're not connecting with our team members, then it's definitely impacting on our clientele, and they will not come back
Right.
at
Oh,
all.
yeah. Why would they?
Yes.
So when it comes down to this idea of like generational leadership, what are some of the most common myths or stereotypes that you find that leaders are falling into?
Look, I think they are falling into those ideas of, well, the ones that have been around for a long time, they've got the state, they're fixed in the way they do things, or they don't want to hear about change. Now, particularly if we look at Gen X as a generation where they, went through a lot of change, and not the last GFC, but the one before, Mark. So a lot of them actually lost their positions and had to come back in and can't see the end of when they're going to retire. So when we talk to them about change in a large group, this is what I've found, they become very much, they lean outward, they look that serious look on their face, and they're thinking, yeah, sure, the last time I heard change, buddy, I lost my job. And so I always say to leaders, when it comes to new ideas, take that group aside, or there may be other individuals within, and have a conversation to say, tomorrow when we're going to have this meeting, we're going to be talking about the changes that we've got in place. But I'd just like to see if you've got any questions. And I know some people may say, oh, Michelle, that's just taking a lot of time. But what you're doing is you're going to have them, when they come in that meeting, prepared. They understand that they're not going to lose the job, what this change means to them, because we just need to give them, and perhaps some others, that little bit more of information. But that also comes down to personalities and behaviours. If you get back to that disc again, you've got your C's who want to know all the data and all the research, where our I's, like, if your guests haven't realised, that's me, like, oh my gosh, I don't mind, just go with it. I think it's a fantastic idea, just go. You've got to give them that little bit more of information too. So I think that's one of the first steps, is really looking at who are in your workplace, not just the generational years, but also those individuals within those years. And then, of course, looking at the Gen Zs, we see them as they're very different. They're very connected with technology, and we're seeing this massive AI integration across all workplaces. It's thinking, instead of looking back and saying, well, they're impatient, it's showing them the steps. And it may feel that they are impatient and they're looking, going, well, I'm not going to sit here for 3 years or 10 years to just wait till I get in line. I want to be able to do that now. And that's where it takes a really good leader, Mark, the opportunity to see that person's potential. You don't want to lose them, because they'll move off very quickly. So encourage them, show them, give them portfolios, special little projects. And it's certainly not spoon feeding them, but what you're doing is showing them the opportunity, but understanding there's levels within that opportunity. And then we all grow together, because we're understanding each person.
Yeah. Well, and as you were saying that, couldn't help but fall back into the hospitality realm again, where you
Yes.
have kids who are going through culinary arts. They do their
Mm.
3 years. They get out into the real world, and then they're like, "Chef, what do you mean I have to just stand here and plate peas or shuck peas? What do you mean? I have 3 years of schooling. I want to be right." And there's this expectation that they're going to be running their own kitchen as soon as they pop out of culinary school. And of
Yes.
course,
Yes.
there's a lot more to that art than just
Mm.
doing 3 years of school and saying, okay, well, now I can run a kitchen. And so
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. I've changed a lot of what I talk about in organizations now is going from this idea of onboarding to forever
Yeah.
boarding,
Yes.
right?
Mm.
Because now it's not a question, it's not a one and done thing. It's not like, okay, here's the policy manual, here's the things you need to know. Okay, now you're all set to go. Go ahead, play nice. and expect
Yes.
them to perform, right?
Yeah. And I've always said, Mark, I find the workplace the most bizarre thing. We're a whole group of individuals. We don't know each other, but we're forced to work a minimum of 8 hours together and play nice, as you said. Talking about culinary school, and going in, we look at hospitality so many times as just that outward facing, the person on the register, the person
Right.
serving the drinks. But that back of house is absolutely key. And over the years, I've met and worked with some amazing chefs and some really young teams. And what's really struck me is the ones that have got a beautiful workplace in the back of house is those that have actually really built on their team. And it was actually a very small regional club that I worked with a while back. And the head chef and sous chef, they were both had their own restaurants, but they'd come into the venue as, executive and sous chef. Every time they walked into that kitchen, they shook every one of their team members' hand, even the pot scrubber. And to me, that was like that wow moment. Left every afternoon or that evening, go around once again shaking their hands. Now, I'm a little bit old fashioned. I grew up with my father and three much older brothers. And, a man's handshake was his word, so to speak. And that was very true. But this way of just connecting with that handshake, the younger ones felt that I'm somebody. I'm
Hmm.
being seen in this kitchen. Now, and that's in a kitchen environment. And where, I wouldn't work in a kitchen if you paid me, Mark. It's hot, it's noisy, it's demanding, it's critical because you're putting your best on the plate and then you've got some mug out the front who says, "Oh, I don't like that." Or
I
that's, that.
I know it should be better because I watch Hell's Kitchen.
Yes. So, everything's going on in their mind. So when you can build that team back of house, as much as, and we'll talk about front of house in a moment, I think that was one of those key points of just shaking their hand and how it made the newer and the younger ones feel, that, as I said, even the person who scrubbed the pots, who to me has one of the key critical positions because nobody wants to
Absolutely.
use a dirty pot. And it's the same who's out the front shining that cutlery. I've always said, a chef creates this amazing menu. They've got this beautiful copyright with these words. You think this is fantastic. It gets plated by the lovely wait person. It's presented to you magnificently and you pick up the fork and there's yesterday's egg in it and you go, forget it. So every job's important, but how do we make that connection? And to me, it's building that team through a handshake right at the start.
So let's rewind just a little bit because I think that a lot of times you have what I like to call incidental entrepreneurs or incidental leaders, people who've never been trained
Mm.
in leadership, and the blame game starts to happen. People
Mhm.
blame they blame what they're seeing, but they're not really kind of whittling back to find out what's at the core of the symptom that they're blaming. What are some
Yes.
common signs that a company is really struggling with generational disconnect and misalignment? What should leaders be looking for?
Well, wondering why staff are leaving for a start. I think,
Hmm.
we see that a lot. We promise them so many things, Mark, in that initial interview. This is what it's going to be like working here. They've done the walkthrough. Everything looks absolutely beautiful. Everything's shining. We've promised them everything. And then on that first, well, then we don't hear, we're the applicant. We've been told we've got the job. And then we may not be starting for 2 weeks. But we hear absolute crickets from the company. So we arrive on the morning. We're not quite sure who we're supposed to ask for. So we think, well, the only person I've met is the HR or the people and culture manager. So I'll ask for them at reception. And the person at reception looks at them and goes, who? Oh, no, they're away today. And so now the applicant starts. So now we've got this new person thinking, I was promised that on my first day I was going to be shown XYZ. So they're standing there feeling quite embarrassed for that probably 10, 15, 20 minutes or more till the reception person really truly finds out who's in the back that can come out and show this new applicant around. And that person's going, well, I really don't know who you're going to be shadowing today. And it's all a little bit mixed up. And you can just see in the applicant's eye is, wow, I thought this organization was not only promising, but going to be delivering on the experience that they talk about to their customers, but also to their internal customers. And if this is how I'm feeling, I don't know what I'm going to be doing here. And so we lose them. And if things don't start at this level, then they start to think, they start to just look at holes. And that's the way I feel, Mark, that when you do that interview, we should be contacting them a few days before, going, oh, hi, making that first impression. Mark, this is great. We can't wait to see you when you join. I'll be there, or so-and-so will be there when you come in. I'm actually at reception waiting for you. I'm taking you through. I don't care if you're the CEO. Everybody has got time to meet that person. I get so disappointed when I meet CEOs, and they're very rarely these days, Mark, and I've had them say to me many years ago, I don't need to know who they are. They're on the floor. I'm up here and I'm thinking, you're not a CEO, you're not a leader, because your middle managers are going to see that and think, well, is that actions and behaviors I'm supposed to model? So to me, it's that really starting point. If we don't make and exceed their expectations as an internal customer, then we're going to lose them very, very fast. They'll just disconnect, which is unfortunate, because a lot of them are really, really good. They just look around going, oh, I don't know if this is for me.
And as you're going through that, I've just, it triggers me because, of course, I've seen it time and time again. This whole idea. In fact, one of our casinos became unionized because we had a leader who came in every day, went up the escalator, went to his office. He didn't walk the casino floor. He didn't walk through and talk to anybody. And I thought, I sat down with him. I said, it would be really easy for each department to give you one piece of information about the team that's on the floor. So as you walk through the floor, you could say, oh, Donna, I heard you're pregnant. Congratulations. That's great news. Right. Yes. As opposed to just ignoring the whole thing and hearing everything as an after effect. And so it really is now, I think, an expectation that we're looking for relational leadership, not just transactional.
Yes. And that is hard. We've got to look at the older generations, both, boomers. There's probably very few of the pre-veterans there, unless it's a smaller family business, so to speak. But even those top end of Gen X, and they've come from this mentality, through family life, through schooling, through university, through other workplaces of you've got to be independent. Don't show your feelings. Don't ask for help, because, oh my goodness, that's a sign of weakness. Whereas we look at particularly Gen Z, and we're certainly not, overseeing the millennials of Gen Y, is that it's all about that group mentality. And I always have a little bit of a joke, and I say it with a tongue in cheek, that two Gen Zs won't walk into a room unless they're holding hands with each other. And I say that in a loving way. I've got two Gen Ys and a Gen Z child myself, but it's true. They have worked in groups at school, at university, in previous workplaces. They work in groups across our social media, and they have global communities that gather together. It is all about, we're doing this together. So when they come to that workplace, you've got that leader who is very much, oh, well, I don't want to show my vulnerability. I don't want to look like I'm asking for help. So they hold back. And so you look at the younger generations and look at going, well, why are you being stiff? Why aren't you sharing what's going on? We want to know your vision. And when we see leaders that are older and they pull down that barrier that they've had for many years and express themselves about, well, this is the vision. These are my values. And Mark, I'm all values-based and have been for 30 years. And I've got to tell you, that was really hard in the old days. Without stereotyping, the people that I was working with was, Michelle, just give us the facts. We just want the data, particularly from the mystery shopping. We don't want your story. But the story is your part of your values, and it's really important. So when these leaders now share their personal values, which are the values of the company, because they need to be congruent, they need to be aligned, then the other generations look at them and go, now I can see your vision. Now we're on this journey together. But it's trusting that people, and sure, you're always going to get somebody who might go, oh, I don't know why do you have to share your life story? And I think there has to be that fine line, but people need to know that you're a person, because we all are.
Yeah. And to your point, it's so funny because I think now with the relational ideas of leadership, it is all rooted in storytelling.
Yes.
I'd love to dig into some strategies of how leaders can start. You started with some strategies, but I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on how they can start evaluating and fine-tuning their awareness and their behaviors. And we'll get to that right after this.
Yes.
When the spotlight shines on your business, are customers applauding or yawning? In other words, how is your business performing? Make your business a star with the new book, Lights, Camera, Action, Business Operational Excellence Through the Lens of Live Theater by Marc Haine. Marc uses his business and acting experience to help you see your business like a live show so you can create a performance your customers will never forget. Buy Lights, Camera, Action today at your favorite online retailer or directly at marchaine.com.
Welcome back. I am speaking with the fabulous Michelle Pascoe. Michelle, you have a book. You want to talk a little bit about the book that you co-authored?
Oh, yes. Well, I've had two now over the years. The last one was the VIP principle. And that was really looking at, the 8 aspects of the business within casinos themselves and registered clubs. And look, I think you can still buy it on Amazon. The hard copy, I sold out. Not a New York Times bestseller. But you know what? I think what was important is people reading that book, and the same as yours, Mike. I love that title, Lights, Camera, and Action, because I always say that, when hospitality is all about being on the stage, isn't it? When, the lights are on, the curtains are open, you've got to own your mood. And I think that is the biggest thing. Nobody wants to know what's happened at home, the tiff with the partner, you've run over the cat, couldn't get a car spot for whatever. You come in because people have come to hospitality because they want to be part of something. It's that feeling of belonging. So how do we, as leaders, as middle managers, as frontline people, as well as back of house, because even though we may not see them, they are part of that, how do we make people feel that they're welcome and that they belong? And that's always been part of my books, but I love your title there, very much so, about you're on the stage. People have come to see you, to have a lovely time. Otherwise, they might as well stay home, roll over, look at their partner or look at themselves in the mirror and just be all grumble.
Yeah.
Don't want to be a grumble.
And it's interesting, too, because I know some people might be tuning in and go, well, I don't have a hospitality business. And my argument is, if you're dealing with people, you have a hospitality business. I don't care if you're a gas station, if you're an optometrist, if you're a podiatrist, if you're dealing with customers, you have to create hospitable environments to welcome people into your business and be able to serve them at a higher level, creating a show each time.
Yeah, definitely, Mark, because, I think all businesses start off with, they look at their cash flow, they look at the financial part, they look at marketing, they look at promotions, they look at everything, but they don't think about the customer journey.
Right.
And all the relevant touch points that there are on that customer journey. And that's what's key. And I think there's no better spectrum than the hospitality industry, where we deal with all generations, all different backgrounds and cultures, and it is an absolute melting pot in the hospitality industry, both our internal and our external customers. So you're right, no matter what industry, whether it's a large multinational or whether you're just a solo entrepreneur, you have to think about that customer journey, and the hospitality industry provides you such a perspective of, well, how do we be tolerant with the multiple generations that are coming in that we are working with and that we're also dealing with, but also understanding who are those that are changing our demographic. And I think that's key too, Mark. A lot of people will start up a business and they are now, but, over years, the demographic changes, particularly if you're in a local area, you're now looking at, those ones that were your main customers, those pre-veterans, those baby boomers, they've now perhaps may have a reduced income, or they've got a larger income, or they're looking for different options, or they're not there as often, or now your whole area has opened up into young families. So what are you offering? So it's thinking about who your market is, but also what's that customer journey for each and every one of them, and who's delivering that journey,
and the customer journey for your employees as well, because it
Yes.
matches up. It's interesting that you say that, because of course that's what I speak on. Is I speak on that people are on a journey with us, and they're actually definable milestones that you can predict with certainty each and every time. And I've tested and tested and tested it. But what's interesting is this idea of engaging like the multi-generations. I talk about in my journey mapping, I talk about the pit of the tainted, where unfortunately, according to Gallup now, there are more people disengaged in the workplace than there ever has been. And so people are sitting and wallowing in this pit of the tainted. But disengagement shows up differently across the various different generations. So I think sometimes people are actually missing the signs that there's disengagement. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like between the different generations?
Yes, yeah. And look, I think you're right. I see that quite often, and you become disappointed because you see such an organization that has got so much potential and individuals that have potential, but they're not actually talking to each other. And I think this is the thing, that we're not sitting in the rooms together. We're not spending time. And if we look at hospitality in particular, we work on so many different shifts. You're rostered here, you're rostered there. And then also, if you look outside the hospitality industry, you're looking at those that are working from home. So we start to think we don't need those people, or we don't need, or we just feel that we don't understand, or we have that assumption about them. So leadership to me is getting to know them individually, and that could well be being in a room, having the staff meeting, so to speak, but having some, instead of just talking to them, I have a great, an experiential game, and it's getting them together, and I give them a little sign beforehand, like a little sticker, and they have to find somebody who they have got the same sticker. And then they've got to talk about 3 things in common. And it's something really simple. And I know a lot of people probably do this, Mark. You may have even done it yourself. It's really simple, but what you see is conversation. It's that connection, because they're not just talking about work. And or they say, don't say, oh, we work in the same place, or I've got brown hair, or I wear glasses. Blah, that's dumb. I want you, don't say, oh, well, I like food. Well, everybody needs food. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But work out what sort of food, what sort of movies. And when I find that, and I do that with my club managers, and then that middle management and frontline and back of house, then you've got chefs that are talking to people that they've never met. Maybe it's a cleaner, and they go, oh my goodness, I didn't know you went for that football team or that hockey team, or perhaps that you like that particular movie. And I find little things like that can just trigger those commonalities, starts conversations. And that's what we need to have, Mark. It's very easy while we're online to, I don't really like that person, I just push the red button and I'm gone, or just take your face off camera. You can't do that in real life. And so it's thinking, well, how can I connect? And so finding out what you've got in common, I think, is one of those very first things. And you can do that in lots of fun ways. I had one venue, because once again, all the different rosters, and in their staff room, they took a photograph of every staff member and then applied a magnet to it, put it on the fridge, and it had a couple of little lines, like where the first name was, what was it, first name, whether they ate a pizza with a knife and fork or with their hands, whether they were a cat or dog lover, and just some fun aspect about each other. And so what would happen, Mark, is each person would come into the staff room. Now you've got this whole front of the fridge is covered with all these people. What do people do when they're waiting to come on shift? They stand in the staff room, putting on the lipstick, brushing their hair, hopefully trying to find the name badge that they probably left somewhere before. And they're looking at that fridge and they start reading about people. That just made such a difference to this particular venue, because when they got out the floor, they were to say, oh, Mark, I haven't met you before, but I've just seen that you've got a cat. We've got one of those. And that to me, when you were talking about before about how do leaders show, that they're people and that they're vulnerable, it is finding out what we've got in common, because we have to work together. We've got to have some form of something that's in common that we can have a conversation about instead of just work, because that will also get us, and this is another thing, Mark, that I want to have a chat about, whether it's now or later, is about that connection to community. Organizations need to be connected to the community, and that's what Gen Z are looking for, very much so. It's not just about work, it's about how we can connect with the community, not just national organizations that need help, but also maybe the retirement village down the road, or there's an older people in your street that need the lawns mowed. Young kids love that. Or we go through different situations here in our regional areas, and at the moment we've had a lot of flooding, and a lot of people can't get to their hospital visits because they're trapped, or they're just not able to, the families aren't able to get to them. And so a lot of the venues are called upon, and I can tell you now, it's all the young ones will put their hands up and go, I'm happy to take that person from that from their home to the hospital for their cancer treatment every day. That's what they love doing.
And even from a business perspective, there is an ROI in investing in your local community.
Yes.
Right. And I find it rather unique when I see operators who are just like so in their kind of in their bubble. And it's like, well, what have you done to do outside of your front door?
Yes.
I'm just too busy. And it's like, but
Mm.
you're telling me you can't afford to do it, but you can't afford not to do it.
Yeah.
Because this is the more people in your community know who you are, the more trust you build. And so
Yes.
even when you let somebody down, or even when things were at 100%, because you've built that trust, people will give you a pass as long as you don't
Yes.
burn them. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
it's
And
like
we
such
know
a simple concept, right?
it is. Word of mouth builds every business, and it can destroy a business within a matter of seconds. You can
Mhm.
market till, and throw millions at things, but it's that word of mouth. And if we
Yeah.
can do that without going, here's what I'm flogging today on social media, instead of, them seeing them down at the blood bank, or helping at the hospital, or helping with domestic violence, or local flooding or fire, Canada's had all those fires, all those different things, that's how people see you, and they see that as the individual, the team, and who they're connected to.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
For those tuning in who are really kind of getting pumped by our conversation today, could you let them know how they can get in touch with you?
Certainly. So they can connect with me. My website is www.michellepascoe.com. So it's MICHELLEPASCOE.com. So that's how they can reach me.
Lovely. Now, you have a PDF, Generations Unite, which goes hand in
Yes.
hand with what we're talking about today. What will can you talk a little bit about what will people get when they download that PDF from the website?
So it's more about what we've been talking today, Mark. So it's very much looking at those individual different generations in the work, and some real strong tips and strategies on connection. So I know we've just touched on them briefly in this episode about that, but really linking them to understanding how do we manage them. Really looking at that stepping up from buddy to boss as well through those generations. To me, that's really key. For all organizations, we really need to be looking at the internal progression, not just always looking outside to recruit people. So that pattern, so there's some strategies around that, but also looking at that succession planning, because building those people within, how do we assist them? Because it's very hard, Mark, for somebody working with their peers, and then tomorrow they're tapped on the shoulder, said that, well, here we are, you're now the leader. And now how do they actually step up into that role? And, I always have this joke, you've got the CEO who turns around, or the COO, and says, my door's always open, as they're slamming it in your face. So if you've got any questions, come and ask me, but they're never around. And some people have got a great skill set, but they don't know how to manage people. And to me, managing people, particularly when you may be a Gen Z and you're now managing people that are Gen X or baby boomers, some of them go in with that thought of, well, how do I connect with them? And there is no better word than respect.
Mm-hmm.
You need to respect them. And it's having that conversation. It's not going in there with all these big wild ideas. It's going in there and saying, I'd love to sit down with you and hear about your journey. Not, oh, tell me what you think should be done. I'd love to hear about your journey in the industry, because now they get to tell the story. Because we've seen with Gen Z, they have a lot of knowledge, but they don't have as much wisdom. And that comes with maturity, but also many of them don't have older people, whether that's through choice or through distance, around them. So when they're in a workplace with older generations, they love to hear that story. I have young kids who work in some of these venues, and the CEO or even other team members have been there, 25, 18 years, 30 years. And the young ones think, did you really think you'd be here 18 years? And they want to know what's that journey being like for them. Why do they work in? I've just done a 3-part series with 3 amazing CEOs on my podcast. So 3 weeks ago, it was Peter Norris. His father was a very well-known bank robber here in Australia, and how that has really built his leadership and where he is in his country. Then I had Glenn Cushion, who's a very strong leader, and then Paul Barnett, and this week. And just the leadership stories, it's, one was a plumber when he first started and came into the industry, Glenn, because they were buying a home, and how they get from picking up glasses, sharpening the pencils, or cleaning the machines, or being a pot scrubber, into CEOs roles. And they love to hear that story. And I think that respect, sitting down and saying to them, that's right. So yes, in that PDF, there's some other tips and strategies, but I'm always here for your listeners, to reach out via email. It's just michelle@michellepascoe.com, or through the website. There's always a few different things there, but it's just understand who is in your team and what are they looking for, and don't have that mask all the time. Actually connect with them and have those conversations. Get out of the office and sit down and have a coffee.
I love that you use the word. I love that you use the word respect, because when we think about the conflict in people, like I used to joke about, if it wasn't for all the people, hospitality would be a cinch, because people are the biggest variable. But when it comes down to like interpersonal conflicts and stuff, we're really talking about things like hurt feelings and losing trust when it comes down to that. So how does one balance consistency and leadership while adopting kind of to the different generational needs?
Yes. Look, I think that's where your values are very important in your business. This is the values of the organization, Mark. And we've always, a lot of companies will have them, or have the vision or the mission statement. They'll stick it on the wall, on the poster in the staff room, or in the employee handbook, and they leave it there. What I feel is when you're actually living and breathing and modeling those behaviors and actions of those values of your company, then that really sets the standard of your organization. So when it comes down to having those conversations where a team member hasn't done the right thing, you can go in there and have that conversation and say to them, well, you did this and you did that, and what are you going to do about it? And they'll just nod their head and go, yeah, and they'll promise you the world, and off they go. But I know the companies that I work with, that when they have those conversations, they connect that to the values. So it would be, Mark, I brought you in today to have a conversation. This is the report from last night. When you read through that report, Mark, I want you to have a look at the values of our company. And where is that misalignment? So you're not only just talking to them about their behavior, you're talking about the behaviors that we are looking for in our organization. And so they are held accountable. And I think is what we're not seeing in our organizations, is being held accountable for our actions. It's very easy to go, oh, well, somebody else will fix it. No, not everybody else is going to fix it. You've got to be accountable for that. And the same goes for acknowledging when they've done a fantastic job, Mark, is that
I was just
you
going to
can
say
sit
that.
there and go, the values. Thank you so much for coming in. What we saw last night was X, Y, Z. Now let's look at our framework. Let's look at our values here. And where's that alignment? Isn't that beautiful? And so when they go away, they don't just go, oh, well, Michelle, the boss, said I was great at what I did last night. I had a chat with Michelle and we talked about the values and what I did. And then they can share that. Now, it may not be as informal conversation like that naturally, but they're going to see that real aha moment. It's not just a pat on the back, it's an alignment with that. And can I just touch on something just a little bit in that about recognition, Mark? Have you heard, the idea of the old just, I don't need to be recognized for anything. I'm doing my job and I'm getting paid for it, And why do all these young ones constantly want to be praised and told, throughout their shift, oh, well, Michelle, you've done a great job. And I say to them, please take off that negative filter that you've got in your mind. Gen Z in particular, or all employees, they want to please you. They really want to please you. You're their employer. They want to be making sure they're doing the right thing. Gen Z say it verbally. So if you've said to them, hey, Mark, can you go and clean the bar? You'll clean that bar. Now, if you're a Gen X or baby boomer, you just disappear and you perhaps go off and do something else. Gen Z, without stereotyping, will come back to me. You'd come back to me, Mark, and you'd say, Michelle, I've just cleaned the bar. Now, I hear too many leaders going, oh, here they go again. They want, the fanfare. They've just done the job. Whoop-de-doo. And I go, no. What they're wanting to do is just to let you know, I've done that. Have I done it right? Have I pleased you? Is there anything else that I can do? Have I done it the right way? Because remember, they're just starting out. They haven't got the years of maturity and knowledge of cleaning the bar or what your expectations are. Particularly, I find a lot of senior leaders will just give them a very short information about what they want them to do and just assume that that younger person who hasn't been in the workplace before or will just know what to do. And then they get annoyed when oh my gosh, they took too long or they didn't do it. I'm thinking, but what did they say? So please, switch that in your mind. And when they come back and go, I've cleaned that bar, just, oh, that's great, thanks. Is that too much to ask, Mark? Is that too much to ask for a leader to say, oh, that's great, thanks?
And it brings up a really good point. Like I've always been a big fan of the adage, what gets recognized and rewarded gets repeated. It is such a simple way of making sure that you get the behavior you want by recognizing the behavior you want and recognizing it, right? It's so much easier than having to do disciplinary action because somebody didn't do something. And to that same point, I've also been in organizations or environments where, somebody misbehaved and the supervisor said nothing. And then when I pull them aside and say, why didn't you say anything? It's like, well, because that's not their typical thing. They don't typically act like that. So it's just a one-off.
Yes.
And what people don't realize is that when you don't address it, you give it permission. And the one thing about bad behavior is it will always evolve into worse behavior. It will never get better on its own. It will always evolve into worse behavior. So a perfect example is somebody in a situation I was in, the bartender cursed with somebody at the bar. And the supervisor walked by and heard it. And she said, oh, I just heard the bartender. And I said, did you address it? She goes, no, she never does it. So it's the first time. I'm sure it's just a one-off. Right. And of course, what do you think happens? Right. And so, but, again, when we see people who are super respectful with their customers and we pull the person aside and say, Paul, I just saw how respectful you were and how kind you were to that one particular customer. Well done. Thank you so much for taking care of that.
Yes.
Now they're pumped. Now they're just chuffed. Right. And they're like, oh, that's the way I'm going to behave because that's the kind of feedback they want.
Yes, yeah. But they also get feedback from the other customers because what they don't always realise, they may be connecting with that customer in front of them and providing them excellent service. But it's the other customers that are around them, Mark, that will see, oh my goodness, wasn't that lovely that they've helped that person, that they've gone above and beyond what they do. And then the customer will come up to them and go, oh, gee, that was nice what you just did for Bob then. It's a bit, he's finding it a bit hard. You took his coffee over to him because, he had a walking stick or he was on his little Zimmer frame, whatever it might be. So what we don't realize is everybody is watching us. Our customers watch us all the time. They watch how we interact with other customers, but they also watch very carefully how we interact with our team members. The roll of the eyes, the shuffling away, the disconnection.
And our other employees hear it as well. They see it and they notice it as well.
Yes, it's loud.
So I'd like to get into some of the most common kind of challenges leaders face when they're trying to improve the situation. I really would like to get into some cautionaries and pitfalls, and we'll get to that right after this.
When you're delivering an important speech to a huge audience, it's easy to lose your place or go way over time. Give yourself an advantage with the Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app. No more checking your watch or calling for time. The Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app keeps you on track with easy-to-see timers, even changing color for visual prompts during your speech. And you can set audio cues to practice or set it to vibrate so you don't even have to look. Be the pro you know you are. Download the app at speakerpresentationtimer.com.
Welcome back. I hope you are getting tons of value from today's episode. As you can tell, Michelle and I are on a mission to support businesses just like yours. So if you belong to an organization, an association that could use our help, or you or someone you know might be planning a leadership retreat or even a conference and you need some really drop dead, really amazing content, drop us a line. We're here to serve, and we'd love to explore how we could be of benefit to you and be of service to you and your people. Michelle, we mentioned about this idea of promoting, buddies to bosses. Can we talk a little bit about the role that training plays in overcoming some of these challenges we've been talking about today?
Definitely. Look, I truly believe in training. And naturally been having a training organization for 3 decades. And I know online training has become quite the norm now, and that's fantastic. But I truly believe that it has to be face-to-face in the sense, I've got an online program that, people use globally, but I still get to see them face-to-face. I need to be in that room because that's where the conversations start. That's where you start building the relationships, so with my middle management movement program, I have CEOs right through to that supervisor who's just been, put up there from the front line, and they're sitting there beside each other. And what they get when they're in the room is not just the program about, recognition, about the leadership, about the values, about the boundaries, etc. over the 15 modules. It's about that connection, and that's why I do it. Because in that room, they get to hear. So let me give you a really quick little story. Regional venue, and it was the CEO, COO, the financial controller, all the top, heavies of the leadership team were in this room. Then they had the executive chef, the sous chef, the duty managers, the supervisors, and then they had this young girl. Now, she'd only been with the venue for less than a year, and she'd just been made up to the cafe supervisor. Now, she was, as I said, she was a very young girl, and she felt very intimidated. She's sitting in the room. We're all, a U-shaped table, and talking about, getting them to introduce themselves. And she starts to cry, and not uncontrollably, but more of that real nervous cry. And she said, I just don't know why I'm here. And the CEO turned to her and said, because you're part of our team, and we want you to know that we are here for you, but we are here for each other. And just at that moment, I thought it was so wonderful for her, because there are very few organizations that a CEO would have somebody so young and they're really just stepped up from their front line, sitting in a room together for multiple weeks on end. And it was, you could just see within her, self-esteem went from here to here. And I thought, wow. And that was just that perfect moment of thinking, just because they're new, it doesn't mean that they can't have ideas, and we need to share them. Because it's very easy for people that have been around for a while going, I've been there, done that, tried that, doesn't work, oh, forget it, not interested. They are seeing things from their perspective. As CEOs and business owners, we see things from here, then our middle managers see it from here, then the front line see it from there, our customers say, but that new person, they're seeing something new. Or they could have been in another organization, even in a different industry, that may go, we did that, oh, okay, we're not going to copy it, but we could tweak it, because that could work really well. So just having the opportunity of having every person on that leadership team, oh my gosh, it makes such a difference. It really does.
So as we're talking about this today, of course, my concern is always being Band-Aid managers, that somebody's going to go, yeah, I have to be better, I'll start tomorrow. What are some cautionaries and pitfalls they should be aware of as they try to rebuild the trust, rebuild the legacy of what their corporate culture is, so that they become more inclusive to all the different generations?
Yeah. And you're right, it is that, oh, well, I'll start tomorrow. And we've always got good plans. It's a bit like that, what do we used to call them, New Year's resolutions? I don't think anybody does those anymore, Mark, because we get to so halfway through January and, oh, forget it, the diet or the health kick or the whatever it is. And it can be like that, oh, well, I'll start tomorrow. And it may start tomorrow, and we can't just turn things around 360 degrees straight away. So to me, it is truly understanding what the vision is of your organization and knowing what your values are. Then as an organization, not just having those values, and this is what I do. I walk into an organization and I'll say, well, these are your values. So what do they mean? And you go, see the team going, oh, I don't know. So it's then working out, what are those actions and behaviors behind every one of those values, and are you modeling them? So as a leader, that's your very first thing, because you are selling, and we're all salesmen, no matter whether you like it or not, or salespeople, we are selling those values. We are selling that belief. We are selling this vision to our team and to our customers as this is where we want our organization to be. This is where we want our team to be. So that's that first port of call, so to speak, is they need to understand what that vision is and those actions and behaviors that they model them. They also need to understand how do we communicate those to the rest of the team. And then the other would be looking at those stereotypes. Don't just assume that because they're a certain age that they'll be wanting to retire, or they're at university and they won't be here after 2 years, or they're a new mother, or whatever it might be. We've got to remove those assumptions and have those conversations. They'd be two really key critical areas that I believe, Mark, in that leadership, in you showing your authority, but also your respect and building that trust and that loyalty, those actions and behaviors for those values. And the other is having those conversations with those people in your workplace about what is their journey, because they don't always know what roles are available because you haven't mentioned them. You haven't even thought. I mean, we've now got community engagement role. My goodness, even prior to COVID, we didn't have that, but now that we do. And, so it's building managers and all these different things. So yes, it's, to me, they're the two key areas.
And it's so interesting. As you were saying that, the one phrase that came to mind was something my mentor told me years ago. If you're not serving a customer, you damn well better be serving somebody who is.
Yes.
And that's been part of that philosophy ever since. Michelle, this has been a really fantastic conversation. Could you remind everybody one more time how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they can come on to my website. So it's just www.michellpascoe.com. Then they can reach me there on the contact page and see what I do. But also for that download, it's Michelle Pascoe /Generations Unite. And that's there for them too. So always happy to help. I've loved having this conversation with you. It's fantastic. I think we could go on all day.
As we wrap up, do you have any last thoughts?
My thoughts is just believe in your own ability as a leader. Be who you truly are. Don't just let the naysayers or your past experiences impact on the leader that you want to be. I think that's key. And for those other generations that are now in the workplace, have a conversation with somebody from a different generation. If you're a baby boomer, or if you're a Gen X or you're Gen Z or Gen Y, sit down with them, have that chat. And perhaps you may even have some alphas, because I know some hospitality businesses have even got the little 14, 15-year-olds now out the back helping in the different catering aspects. Have a conversation with them, get to know who they are as a person, and blow those myths away about these generation divisions.
Love it. Michelle, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge and your passion and your expertise. It's been brilliant.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I wish you and all your listeners all the very best. Love hospitality, love being with people, and just love what you do.
Lovely. Hey, if you have any questions about today's episode, or maybe you're thinking, hey, we could really use a complimentary 30-minute brainstorming session with Mark, well, good news, you could snag a spot on my calendar. Just hit the link below, the one that's marked meetwith.marchaine.com, and you are all set. And as always, I am at your service. If you haven't done so yet, why don't you go ahead, subscribe to this podcast, follow me on social media. I'd love to see you part of this conversation, and thank you very much for being here. My name is Marc Haine. I hope you stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope you dare to be the exception.